Well, let's get started. Welcome, everybody. My name is Ben Piccini. Welcome to Radical Civility. And I am joined by my producer and friend, Dallin Crump. Dallin, me, and Nick Reese are kind of the team here at Radical Civility. And I was like, hey, anybody want to let me rant a little bit about student loan debt? And Dallin was willing. I think this is eminently relevant because I was talking to Dallin just before we started. Why don't I let you introduce yourself and why you have a unique perspective on this?
Okay, yeah, I guess we're trying something a little different here. I've actually had the opportunity to help Ben with some editing and producing of the last couple of episodes of Radical Civility. I love the idea of the podcast. I love the premise. I love this idea of having difficult conversations, but having them civilly, having them well, and like just trying to tackle these big ideas and these controversial issues that we're all wrapped up in these days. But anyway, so on this particular topic with student debt, I was telling Ben, like, I actually don't have a college degree, and actually in my current employment, I'm the director of business intelligence for a healthcare technology company based in Nashville, Tennessee, a healthcare company. It's a really good gig. I love it. It's work from home. But I've been able to kind of work my way up through the ranks, so to speak, in various positions and various jobs, and do some self-education in combination with work experience to get into the position I'm in now. And when people ask me where I went to college or where I got my degree, I say actually Google University, and I'm still attending. And because that really is like in a kind of a technical field when you're doing what I'm doing, like working with data, doing data visualization, using software and tools and things to create these data visualizations and such. There's a lot of free or really cheap material out there that you can actually just kind of take a course, or you can actually watch a video, see what somebody else has done, and kind of adapt that to what you're doing, or scour, forums or things of that nature to kind of to be able to do what you're trying to do. So if I've ever been confronted with a situation where I didn't know how to do something, I just typed it in a search engine and looked through the results, and I've gotten really good at Googling and looking for the type of information that I need to do what I need to do. So Google has been a big part of my education, so to speak, Google and YouTube and forums and so forth. So, yeah, like it's just kind of worked out to where I've been able to get to where I have been, where I am, without having to actually get a formal degree. Now, that's not to say like that I'm not averse to going to college. As a matter of fact, I've actually very seriously considered doing BYU Pathway, and actually getting at least a bachelor's degree through that, and then deciding what to do from there. But just up until now, it hasn't really worked out. And I guess there's several reasons for that. And feel free to interject, Ben, if you have any questions, because I feel like I'm rambling here.
No. This is well. I'll ask a question just so I can break it up. Yeah. But I want to hear your reasons why in a second. When you talk to your own kids, do you say like, "Hey, you have to go to college," or do you say like, "You choose the path that is right for you"? Like, what is your conversation when you're coaching them?
Okay, yeah, that's a great question. So, I have one child. His name's Wesley. He's 15. He'll be 16 in January. He'll be driving. Clear the roads, everybody. He's going to a charter school in our area that's focused on like the STEM disciplines and so forth. And he wants to be I think last I talked to him about it, he wants to be an aerospace engineer. So he wants to work for like SpaceX or Virgin Galactic or NASA or whoever, and design and build spacecraft and send them into space. So he's really, really focused and interested in that. So when we have conversations about school, like my approach has been never to pressure to go to college, but to help my son understand, like, figure out what he's good at, figure out what he has an interest in, and then if he wants to pursue a career in that, okay, let's figure out how to do that. So like if he wanted to be a welder, for example, I would say, okay, well, go to Bridgerland, go to the local technical college and get a certificate, and be a welder, right? Like, and that's great because, do you know how much money welders make? Like good
Yeah.
welders, it's
Yeah.
ridiculous.
Well,
Um,
and you'll find out when you need one, right?
and you,
Like,
but like, right. So like whatever he wanted to do, like, it wasn't always like, you must, like, I've never approached it from like, you must go to college. Right. I think I wouldn't want a brain surgeon operating on me who hasn't gone to college. Right. Like it depends on your career, depends on what you want to do and whether or not it makes sense. And so, yeah, like, no, like not pressuring him to go to college, but if that's the path that he wants to go, like 100%, 110% supporting him and wanting to make that happen.
you were about to
So,
talk about the reasons why it didn't work out for you, and I want to talk about that too.
yeah. So, back in the day, this is back before I got married. I had just returned from my mission, like was going to community college. At the time, I had decided that I wanted to be a band director. So I wanted to pursue a degree in music. So, I played the clarinet and saxophone and woodwinds and so forth, and just loved it. Did it all through high school, and took a year at college before I went on my mission, community college, and came back and continued with community college. And then I was living in the Phoenix area at the time, and I applied to Arizona State University. I auditioned, was accepted into their program, got some scholarships and stuff, and was looking into financial aid and all of that. But then I kind of realized that um, I would be going to school with kids who were able to, lock themselves in a practice room for like 6 hours a day and get really, really proficient on their instruments, and be able to devote that kind of time to their education. And I was not able to do that. My parents were not able to help me financially through school, so I was either going to have to, get some grants or scholarships, or I was going to have to go into debt. And I was very averse to going into debt. Like I just didn't want to. Like I understood that that's kind of what you do if you go to school. You're going to have to incur some student debt. But I personally kind of rejected that. I was like, no, like I'm gonna like work and put myself through school, or I'm not gonna go to school, or I'm gonna find a way to support or to go to school without having to get into this crazy debt. So that was kind of in the back of my mind. So I was waiting to start my first semester at Arizona State, and then I guess I had like an epiphany, I guess you could call it, or whatever. But I just kind of realized, like, you know what? Like I think I want to be able to get into a career that will allow my future wife, whoever she may be, the opportunity to stay home with the kids if she wants to do that. If she wants to have a career, great, more power to her. I'll support her in that. But if she wants to stay home with the kids, I want to be in a position to do that. And I realized, teaching is probably not
I'm
it,
so offended. How dare you state the truth
I
so
mean,
clearly?
I mean, this might resonate with you a little bit, Ben. I'm not saying like my father was a teacher. Okay, so you have to kind of understand where I'm coming from. My father was a teacher. He was a band director for decades, and my mother had to work, and she had to kind of support like the family, and that was something that she kind of resented, that she wished that she had been able to stay home with us, and I think that was probably one of the reasons that eventually led to my parents' divorce. And so that was kind of at the forefront of my mind. Like I was like, okay, I want to be in a position to allow my wife to do what she would like to do, if possible. So anyway, I decided, okay, well, maybe I'll just pause here for a moment and assess and decide what I'm going to do from here. If it's not going to be music, I got to figure out what I'm going to do. So I actually didn't go to ASU. And at the time I was working for Wells Fargo Bank. And so I decided, okay, well, I guess I can continue working for the bank. And I do know that the bank offers tuition reimbursement. So maybe I can like find a career or degree path that the bank will actually reimburse me for. or help out with some tuition. So that would be a way I could get some help with school. So I decided to just kind of continue working and figure out what to do from there. Well, it basically from that point on, like I took an interest in databases and working with data and data visualization and reporting, and went from just kind of did like company sponsored trainings, like they would send me to like day-long trainings for, databases or SQL or whatever. And I figured I was interested in it. And so I wanted to kind of pursue that. And so basically every position that I've been in since then, it's kind of built upon the things that I've learned in the previous position, right? Or it's kind of pushed me in a direction where I pursued like self-education for these specific disciplines or these specific things that have led me to be able to get the job that I have now. And it just never at any point was it like a necessity for me to go back to school to be able to advance my career. Like it's just kind of happened. And I guess I'm fortunate because I'm in a technical field where if you can demonstrate that you know what you're talking about and your work kind of speaks for itself, they don't really care whether or not you have a degree.
Okay,
So,
this is
yeah.
like fascinating and also really exciting to me. This is like so what I'm hoping to do for the rest of our time is to talk about, okay, President Biden has made the suggestion. He's trying to cancel $10,000 of people's student loans. This is a campaign promise that he made. There's some question as to whether this is legal, whether he has the authority to do it without going by Congress. And there's some people who are even cynically saying he is making an attempt that he knows will be shut down so that it doesn't make it through. I don't know about all of that stuff. What I can tell you is, and this is my opinion, I think that we are hearing a lot right now on Twitter and other places from people who are in the place, and I want to emphasize this. There are good people who are going to be helped by this. That is not my concern. In fact, I saw this great clip or quote by, I think, Dave Ramsey, who said, look, I am thrilled that there are people that I'm rejoicing with my friends who are going to be benefited by this. But I'm also concerned about the other impacts. That doesn't mean that I don't care about them. I think that's wonderful. I think whether it's a good policy or not has to be a little bit better than just, will it help some people, right? And I think that that's a part of it. So what I'd like to do is spend some time talking about why I'm frustrated by this bill or this proposal, but what we could do better. But before I get to that, I want to ask you another question. Do you feel, have you ever been mistreated because you don't have a degree? Or do you ever feel like people look at you funny or aren't sure if they can trust you? And I'll say it this way. I think in our heads, we have an idea of people who haven't graduated from college. And I told you this before the show, I'm going to repeat it now. I said, I know this is condescending. I'm going into this phrase knowing how awful it sounds, but you are so impressive for someone who didn't go to college. What kind of an awful thing does it, like, that's so stupid, right?
Thank you, I guess. Yeah.
You wouldn't say that to somebody who didn't go to plumbing school. You wouldn't be like, wow, you really, you don't strike me as someone. This isn't a commentary on you. I think it's a commentary on a very broken system. So what has been your experience?
Well, I mean, there is this prevailing assumption that right. Like I guess there is this prevailing assumption that if you go to college, then you are educated and you know things, and if you don't go to college, you don't. And I mean, education is good. Like, I mean, I think we can all agree that education is good. I think how you get an education, though, I mean, that's evolved over time. That's changed. Like, it used to be that you couldn't get an education anywhere else but a university, by attending university. And that's still the case for many careers, right? Like, again, I don't want a brain surgeon operating on me who's gotten his education from YouTube, right? Like, I want him to have that degree. I want him to be credentialed when he's operating on my brain. I want to know that he's gone through that process, those expectations for getting an education in that field, and being certified in that field. But I don't know. I mean, you remember the show Dirty Jobs?
I love Mike Rowe. He is one of my heroes.
Right. Like, so, I mean, I think I like him a lot because, I mean, he champions this idea that, like, okay, that there are people who are doing important very high paying jobs in some cases, welding, right, for example, who don't have a college degree, but they've received the training necessary to perform the task that is necessary for their field of work. And they are, just as skilled in that particular discipline as a brain surgeon would be in their discipline, right? They just got their education a different way. So, I mean, to answer your question, like, am I treated differently, or have I noticed people like, I mean, I honestly don't know. Like, I mean, I've applied for jobs in the past that I haven't gotten, but like, I don't recall ever being told like, we're not going to consider you for this position because you don't have a college degree. So no, I mean, I think like you, like people like talk to me and they just assume like I have a degree. Like they assume I've gone to college. I have a college education, which, I have for a couple of years. I just didn't finish. I didn't get that degree, that piece of paper that says I've completed the degree program. So yeah, like I mean, nobody's said to my face, like, you didn't go to college, so like, you're, not qualified, or you're not, because again, like I can demonstrate that I know what I'm talking about. Like when I go through an interview process, and I've had a lot of different jobs, but when I go through the interview process, like just over the course of the interview, me discussing like my experience and my background and what I do and what I've learned and what I'm able to do, it's apparent that I know what I'm talking about. Like I'm not faking this. Like I didn't watch a YouTube video learning how to fake my way through a business intelligence interview, right? So,
well, so it's interesting because I do not have a degree in podcasting. I know nothing about, like, people are like, you have a podcast. And I was like, do I? I don't know. Like, I just talk into a microphone that I bought. Like, it's always a little bit weird to me to remember that I have like a legit podcast now and people actually listen to it. And when I don't produce for a couple of months, people are like, what happened to you? Are you ill? Right? Like, it's just very weird. I learned how to do all of my audio stuff online, right?
mm-hmm.
Like, and I'm not just talking to a microphone is obvious, but I've got a mixer over here. I know how to do some basic editing. And when you showed up, it was amazing because you actually know how to do some of this stuff. But if I'm not mistaken, you also taught yourself a lot of this stuff.
Oh, absolutely.
Right?
Again, it was just like necessity. Like, I have a YouTube channel that is, I guess, now defunct or whatever. I mean, it still exists, but like me fooling around and experimenting and creating videos and putting them out there. And that requires learning how to do video editing. And so to do video editing, you got to figure out what tools are available. So like all of this is like me just researching on the internet, like how to do this and like figuring it out kind of through trial and error, and also just seeing what other people have done. Right. But that's just how I've operated in my entire career. So it was just like, okay, I've done that like for my actual job that pays me money. I can apply that same skill set of like researching and learning how to do something to learning how to create YouTube videos and learning how to edit podcasts, right? And things like that. So,
and I think this is, at the most fundamental level, the reason why I'm upset with the president's proposal is not because I don't want to help people, not because of anything like that. I do think, and I will say this, I think we are increasingly building a society in which if you don't have a college degree, it's going to be hard. Unless you have some technical abilities in certain skill areas, it's going to just be tougher and tougher and tougher because of this prejudice that we have. It's interesting. The Book of Mormon talks about costly apparel. It talks about how the people, every time the people start going off track, it's actually interesting. My wife was talking to me the other day. She said, did you know that America is the most individualized nation in the world? And I said, that doesn't surprise me. We're very rugged individualism. And, and I'm, I've had my own brush with libertarianism. I am still a cautious fan, I guess is the way I would put it. But then she said something else interesting. She said, as it turns out, individualism and wealth tend to go together, but they think that one leads to the other. A lot of people used to think that it was individualism that led to wealth, but it seems to be that wealth leads to individualism. That as soon as we get a little bit wealthy, we stop worrying about it. And I find that a really interesting thesis. Now, you'd have to do some empirical background work to see if that's true. I think the reason why, at its most fundamental, the reason why I disagree with the president's proposal is because my goal is not to get more people to college. My goal is to get more people to have a great life without having to need to go to college. And that is the fundamental, like, separating point after which everything else is going to be really hard. I like college. I think it's great. I think it's good for people to have if they can. But honestly, As I look at this, I am looking at a country that is increasingly more credentialed,
Yeah.
a country where we always feel the need. When I was growing up, it was get as much education as you can. And now to my kids, I've said, you don't get to go to Columbia. Right. Like, and like, sorry, you just don't. Like, we can't, right? There's no way.
Yeah.
And I'm not trying to be mean. It's just like, there are only some schools we can afford. You're going to have to choose from among them. And that's assuming, like, if you can be a plumber, that is a wonderful life. I think part of it's kind of like the home ownership thing. I remember in 2008, there was a lot of discussion about this. In 2008, we realized that we had been pushing everybody to own a home, own a home, own a home. That's the American way. You haven't really lived the American dream until you have a white picket fence and you own your own home. And we have a lot of people who are in homes that they don't want, that are bigger than they need, that they can't afford. And all of a sudden it's like, why were we pushing this? And also, what's wrong with renting? Like, is it really a moral issue or is it an economic choice? And living on the East Coast, it especially made no sense. I think we've done the same thing where we've made college a moral choice instead of an educational one. Like, if you don't go to college, there's something wrong with you, instead of choose the path that makes the most sense for the job you want to do.
There's so much to unpack here, Ben. This is a deep rabbit hole that we could go down. It didn't always used to be this way, right? Like, it used to be that you could, you could go to school, like secondary school. So you primary school, like, and then secondary school, like the equivalent of high school now. And once you finish secondary school, like, for most people, that was good enough. Like, that was it. Like, that was like, okay, I'm educated now. Like, I know how to read. And now I'm going to go, work the farm, or I'm going to go work this trade, or I'm going to start a business or whatever. Right. Colleges existed, obviously, but that was for, like, if you wanted to do like more advanced disciplines. Right. But it wasn't like this standing expectation that, like, everybody must go to college. Right. And if they don't go to college, then they're not good enough. Or if they don't go to college, then they're not educated. So it didn't used to be that way. So you're right. Like, it's evolved to the point where, like, everybody's credentialed. And so, like, I guess, I mean, it's almost like competitive, right? Like, you have to be credentialed to even compete for jobs that shouldn't require a degree.
Okay, so you just nailed, like, the biggest one that I have. So I'm writing this little piece. We'll see if it ever gets published. And it's called 10 ideas that are better than Biden's, right? How to fix the college debt issue. And let me stress up front. I think the president's a nice man. I think he is trying to do something to help, and he's also trying to do something that will both please his base, and that is, political motivations are part of it. That's not because he's a bad person, it's because he's a politician, right? He also wants to help people. I hope that he and anybody else who is listening can hear this and understand there's a way to do that, and it's not the way that they're going about it. The number one thing, if you look at the supply and demand equation, is to reduce the demand for college. And what I mean by that is, going back to what I said a minute ago, my goal is not to get more people to college. It's to get more people to a great life without having to need to go to college, right? I think that one of the best examples of this is, 100 years ago, 200 years ago, maybe now, lawyers didn't need to pass a bar. They didn't need to have a degree.
Right.
They could just represent themselves.
Right.
And the way that it worked was basically on reputation. Like, nobody's going to hire you if you're not a good lawyer. But it was very similar to what you're talking about, where it's like, okay, if I look at your cases and you lose them all, I'm not going to hire you.
Yeah.
And what's interesting is now today we have this weird credential, but, like, that doesn't mean they're actually an effective lawyer. You don't know if they're garbage. You don't know if they win their cases. You don't know if they've been indicted for fraud. And so I think this is very much part of my concern, is, like, not only do I think credentials are not a good trade because it locks some people out, I also think it represents this false sense of security where it's like, oh, well, they got their degree from Harvard. Yeah, so did Skilling, right? And he was in prison, right? Like, just because somebody goes to Harvard doesn't mean that they're a good person, B, they're good at their job. But we've kind of just allowed this lazy proxy of a college degree stand for everything. And so that's like background checks, right? Yeah.
It's the same concept.
I didn't want to make it too, I forget that you edit my pieces, so you know what I'm talking about. Yeah, exactly. So actually, Grover, what's his name? A Utah politician, a House member, I think it's Keith Grover, just suggested that all clergy should be required to get a background check. Now, I oppose this idea. It's not because I want to protect churches at all. It's because I think that it's going to lull people into a false sense of security. They're going to say, "Oh, it's background checked. It's fine." You know who had a background check? The psychopath, evil, horrible man who committed. I'm just going to stop. the guy in Arizona that did terrible things to his daughters.
Mm-hmm.
He was a member of the Border Patrol. You have to have a background check to work there. Is it the case that you might catch one or two? You might, yes. I'm not saying it's completely ineffective, but you're also going to lull parents into this false sense of security. In the same way, this is what happens with credentials. I think our background check system is super not effective at trying to do the things that we expect it to do.
Yeah.
And I think that credentialing generally is the same way. So let me go to a related issue. One of the things that I've heard recently that I actually am hoping will happen is that the place where we will finally break the credentialing is in computer science and big data, because people can get those skills for free on their own and apply directly without having college and just saying, look, I know what I'm doing. You can wait for me 3 years more to get a degree. And those companies are already reaching out and saying, no, we'll take you now. If you know how to do, like, here's a test. If you can pass it, we'll take you.
Exactly. Yeah. No. And it's not like, so this resonates with me a lot, right? Like, because like, again, like you can get this education, maybe not for free, but for so much less than going to a college, paying college tuition. By the way, college tuitions are ridiculous right now. They're just insane. Okay. Like, I mean, BYU Idaho is awesome. Like, so it's like the shining beacon on the hill example of like providing an amazing education for a decent cost. And so if I were ever to go back to college, I'd go to BYU Idaho, or I'd do BYU pathway and then complete my education at BYU Idaho. Hands down.
It was actually funny. Somebody online was, so I was like, here are some things that President Biden could do and college administrators could do if they wanted to make it. No, that's what it was. Somebody was like, do you really want us to cut costs? Do you know what it's going to come from? It's going to come from your dorm's AC. Are you really sure you want to live without that? And I was like, no, that's not the finding. Like, it's about administration. Like, this is bloat. Like, we know this. This has like been studied for like 15 years. But so I said, okay, here are 10 things colleges can do right off the bat that are really easy. And like, I don't think that people realize how easy a lot of these things are. They are very, very eminently doable. But then the second thing was, at the end of the list, somebody was like, it sounds like you're just describing BYU Idaho. And I was like, you got me.
Oh,
right?
No, I
like,
mean, yes, seriously,
yes,
like,
yes.
So like I'm currently serving as a high counselor in my stake, and as a part of my responsibilities, I am responsible for BYU Pathway, like for disseminating information to my stake about BYU Pathway, like upcoming application deadlines and stuff like that, and webinars and things that are coming up. And I've had a chance to sit in on a BYU Pathway group and see how they run it and stuff. And as I've learned more about BYU Pathway and what it is, there's not a doubt in my mind that this is a divinely inspired program that's it's already revolutionizing college education. It is.
Absolutely. And to be clear, I really like my church. I think it's great. I think everybody should be part of it. I get it. Not everyone will. That's fine. We can still be friends. I came to BYU Idaho because we are doing the cool things here, because we are having hard conversations and trying to figure out how to get this right. And we are not perfect. And I know that, but boy, are we doing some really, really cool things. And let me also emphasize, that is not because of the subsidy that people get if they're a member of my church. You get a lower tuition if you're a member of my church in good standing. I will also argue until I am blue in the face that if somebody swears not to drink any alcohol, that reduces the cost for the college, right? That if somebody is going to school in order to go to school, that makes school a lot more about school and a lot less about partying. Yep. I think the college is one of the worst, the most expensive rites of passage we ever could have dreamed up, right? Like, you shouldn't be going to college to party. You shouldn't be going to college I hope you have fun, right? That's fine. But we have made something, we have said, unless you go to a certain kind of party that's really expensive, you shouldn't be allowed to get most jobs. That's crazy.
My rite of passage was serving a mission.
Yeah.
That was my rite of passage.
It was actually funny. A friend of mine went to BYU Law, and I said, how was it? I've heard it's a pretty decent program. It's not like the top, but it's a good program. He said, well, it is kind of the top. And I said, well, aren't we a little braggy today? And he said, no, I don't mean that. He said, I think we're an above average program, but we're not the top of the field. But then he clarified in two ways. He said, number one, I think we're a pretty good program. I think that the top 10% of BYU Law can go anywhere they want in the world. that you could match them with anybody from any school. And I said, okay,
Yeah.
that makes sense. And then he said a second thing. He said, the other thing you got to understand is when somebody gets into Harvard or you know, some other school, they're in and they don't have to worry about it. When somebody gets into BYU Law, nobody at BYU Law is going to party. Most of them have families,
Yeah.
right? Like they're going home and they are studying their brains out because it's about what place you rank in the school.
Right.
So this is a bunch of really, really hardworking, smart people who are banging their heads against a wall saying, I have to do well. And so the competition is just insane because nobody takes breaks. They're like, this is my family. I have to do well. And that's just the effect.
Yeah. So what are some other ways that we can do this better? Like this so-called solution that Biden has introduced is not a solution. It's a Band-Aid, right? It's not addressing the fundamental underlying issues. So
yes.
what can we do then? Like what is going to address this exorbitant tuition costs across the country and so reducing the cost of education? Like how are we going to address these fundamental issues?
Well, the first rule of thumb is, I tweeted about this earlier. There are a couple of memes that I find very entertaining, and I won't be able to reproduce here because too many of you listen on podcast form. I could share it on the YouTube version, but my listeners on the podcast version wouldn't get the joke. So I'll explain it the best I can. As it turns out, paying a big check, writing a big check to universities is not a good way to teach universities a lesson. That is the number one understanding you must have before you get into this conversation. Universities are pleased as punch because Republicans are mad at Democrats, Democrats are mad at Republicans, and universities are going, oh, shucks, we're going to get paid more, right? Like no university is upset right now, okay? So my number one rule is don't make the problem worse, right? What do doctors have to learn? They have to learn, not the Pythagorean theorem. What's the other one? Oh, the Hippocratic Oath. Sorry, math teacher. The Hippocratic Oath. First, do no harm, okay? The number one thing that any politician should have to swear to do if they're going to do anything with college is stop subsidizing, or at least don't make subsidies worse. Okay. Basic economics, very simple concepts. I am oversimplifying, and I know that. I think that all of the rules hold true in this case, but I think even in general, they're really good rules of thumb. If the government encourages something by paying for it, that's called a subsidy. This is what, when you talk about prices and subsidies, that's what economists study. If only we had a group of people that had studied this and had tried to figure out what was the root cause of the problem. Okay.
It also removes the consequences of failure.
Bingo.
Right? Because you can be a great university or a terrible university and you're still going to get your subsidy most of the time. I think there are strings attached and stuff and like, you know, requirements and things that have to be met. But do you know how easy it is to like fake a lot of that?
Oh, 100%.
to like fudge numbers and say, hey, we're great. Yeah.
The best example I can think of is actually public schools. The public versus charter debate, somebody will always bring up this number. And I'm very much on the charter and choice and accountability side. And that's okay. We can be friends if you're not. But one of the things people always bring up is, well, I hear a lot of those charter schools close. And I said, yes, that's a feature, not a bug.
Yep.
When you can't close down because you're always going to get a subsidy, what improvement mechanism is there?
Yep.
Some of it is because people want to improve so they don't close down. Most people don't want to be bad at their jobs. Part of it is just, if it's not working, you have a moral obligation to say this needs to stop. There's nothing worse than walking into a school that's been a failure for 40 years, knowing it's still a failure, it's still failing kids, and never is anyone going to have the hard conversation about, we are doing something so wrong, we should just stop. It would be wrong for us to keep going. And yet that's what happens. Mm-hmm. So yes, to your point, the subsidy is the problem, right? If subsidizing American education was the path to paradise, we would have been in Eden ages ago, right? We would have already achieved nirvana. We are not even close. In fact, I think that, let me put it this way. In economics, the first thing that you learn about subsidies are, it will increase the amount of people that are doing the thing, whatever the thing is. So if you pay people to like, go get a math degree, you'll get more people who get a math degree. But there are two other things that come with it. First, the price will go up because everybody's scrambling for the same math degrees.
And they're getting a boatload of money from the government.
That's right. So now all of a sudden there's going to be that effect. The price always goes up. Does that sound familiar? Yes, that's exactly what has happened, right? The second effect is, and we call this inefficiency. I don't mean inefficiency in terms of, academic bloat or bureaucratic bloat. What I'm talking about is people buying things that they don't need because they're cheaper than they ought to be. So in the case of education, you actually see a lot of this. You see a lot of people getting degrees, and I'm not saying they're bad people. I'm just saying, I don't know that you really needed a degree for a lot of the jobs that are currently out there. And we're not willing to have the hard conversation with employers that they need to stop using a college degree as the catch-all. If you have a college degree, you can work for us. And if you don't, you can't. I don't think it's, let me be clear. I'm not saying that they are just being a little bit lazy. I'm saying that what they are doing is actually immoral. If you are not hiring waitresses unless they have a bachelor's degree, that is wrong.
Yeah.
That is a really, really bad thing. And effectively what you're doing is you're making the bachelor's degree a token of privilege. You're making universities traffickers in privilege that say, unless you have this thing, you're locked out of the system in a way that is super, super unfair.
Which is why like associate's degrees are pretty much worthless now. Like, I mean,
Correct.
who stops at an associate's degree? Like, when an associate's degree actually is a good milestone. Like,
oh yeah,
I think this is why I think it's interesting. I feel like I'm being a shill for BYU Pathway, but I think it's a really good idea because I actually worked at Utah State University for 5.5 years, interestingly enough, with no degree. So like I'm working at a university, like helping students like get a product that I actually haven't availed myself of yet. But anyway, but anyway, like, oh, what was my train of thought? I'm sorry, Ben.
Don't worry about it at all.
My train of thought completely derailed, smashed into a wall. Anyway.
So let me just say a couple of things on this issue. What are some things the president could do if he wanted to fix this problem? I think the easiest thing he could do that he has total legal authority to do is not to act as commander in chief, but to act as the hiring manager in chief. The US government is the largest employer in the world. It is certainly the largest employer in the United States. With the stroke of his pen, he could say every hiring manager in the government needs to go through their hiring requirements and make sure that if you're calling for a degree, they better well actually need one. And wherever possible, see if there's a way that you can create an alternative that is more meaningful and that does a better job. Now, a lot of people are going to say, well, but it's just so hard. I'm a hiring manager. I don't have time to. Okay, look, calm down. There's a really easy way to do this. What we are using college for, why we've fallen into this problem, is because it tells you actually a lot of things that are really useful. It's a decent proxy for IQ. It's a really good proxy for compliance. Do you get things done? Do you turn them in on time? Do you work hard? Those are the things that we're actually looking for. It's actually, I don't think it's a super meaningful thing about content because I don't think that's what we're going to college for. It's about skills. It's about ability to show up, talk to your professor, all of that stuff. Interesting note, I mentioned IQ. I don't really love the idea of IQ tests for jobs. That feels a little bit icky to me. There's some where maybe that's necessary. But I think it's worth noting that GPA is much more predictive. GPA does not predict IQ, but it does predict life success a lot better than standardized test scores. And so what that means in my mind is your ability to play the game of school, to comply, to conform a little bit, to go and talk to your professor, to meet up with office hours, to get notes from a friend, all of those skills are the skills that are preparing you for the job market, which is great. Here's what I would argue, though. Most of those skills can be taught in the job market.
Yes.
Right? Or through internships or
and
through
probably better in the job market because you're actually learning those skills in the context of what the business needs. Right.
That's
like
bingo,
of that specific business. And I'm sorry, my train of thought is back on track.
Go.
I remembered what I was talking about. So like how associate's degrees and certificates are kind of seen as worthless. But BYU Pathway does this nifty thing called stackable credentials. So like you actually earn certificates on your way to an associate's degree, and then you earn your bachelor's. So you actually, in other words, those milestones matter. Like you have something that says like, I've completed this course of study to get a certificate. I'm certified in this area. I have an associate's degree, in this particular field. Like, I think it's like bringing back the notion that like, these things aren't worthless. They mean something, and they actually they should matter to employers. And you can tell employers, hey, I've done this like on my way. I don't have a bachelor's yet, but I have an associate's on my way to a bachelor's. I think just even showing that I've completed these milestones on my way to a bachelor's is more valuable to a potential employer than just going straight for a bachelor's.
Absolutely. Two thoughts on that. The first one is credential inflation. This happens everywhere, right? This is the natural course of events. When my grandparents were, so neither of my grandfathers graduated from college, as far as I remember. I don't think they did. Both of them had good jobs. It was not an issue. It was never a concern, right? Like it would, like my one grandfather was a mechanic. The other one did stuff with temples for our church, right? They did great. They had a good life. It was not an issue. My mom doesn't have a college degree. My dad has an MBA. Now today, I'm looking around at my peer group, and it's like expected if you don't have a master's degree. Even my friends with master's degrees are sometimes having a hard time finding a job.
Okay? Yep.
I should have known something was weird. When I go for Teach for America, great program, loved it, had a great experience. I go out with Teach for America and I look around and I go, oh my goodness, there's a good percentage of you who feel like Teach for America is a 2-year stop on your way to law school. Some of you are doing this to better your chances of law school. And here's the crazy part. When I would ask them, do you want to be a lawyer? They said, no, I just haven't figured out what to do yet. So I'm going to do TFA for 2 years and then I'll go to law school.
Then I'll go to law school.
Will come up.
Yeah.
That is the problem. Law school is a technical field. It should be about being a lawyer. It should not be about having an impressive credential. And we've kind of fallen. I have friends who've gotten joint JD MBAs. That's awesome. Every one of them have told me, I didn't need it. I don't know why I did that. Right? Like, I mean, maybe for some people you need that, but for most people, it's just like, let me be as impressive as I can be. And you get way over credentialed. It's not super useful. Let me just give one other thought really quick in passing. There's this great story in Utah of a woman who immigrated, and I can't remember what country it was from. I want to say Nigeria, but I could be wrong. She immigrated to Utah and opened up a hair place. So she did hair braiding and some other stuff, and the Cosmetology Association shut her down and said, I'm sorry, you don't have the right credential.
Mm-hmm.
She said, okay, well, how long does it take me? They said, well, 18 months. So she got a lawyer and they went to court, and the lawyer asked one question. They said, how long does it take to become an emergency medical technician? You know, the people that come in the ambulance, not the paramedic, but the people that, you know, drive and stuff. They said, well, it takes about 48 hours. And they said, okay, remind me again why I need to take 18 months. And they said, oh, well, it's for safety. Okay, so it takes me 48 hours or maybe a semester to become trained as an emergency, you know, and different locales are different.
Sure.
To become trained as an emergency medical technician on the basis of safety. But to be a hair braider, it takes me 18 months. The basic form of economics on this is very simple. If you're selling lemonade and so is Bobby down the way, the easiest way to put him out of business legally, you can't walk over and club him in the kneecaps, but you can say, oh, you don't have the right food handler's permit. I'm sorry, Bobby. Look, if you're buying lemonade from kids on the street, you buy it and you don't drink it. Everybody knows this, right? Like, don't be gross, right? But at the same time, like, it's a little bit crazy to me that anybody does not see. And I'm not saying that people are evil or vindictive. I'm not saying that they were trying to do this, but like the Obama administration and traditional libertarian conservatives are all on board. The Obama administration put out a release on this saying, guys, occupational licensure is the enemy here.
Yeah.
We need to scale back. And the problem is, you know, you said about doctors, I want doctors who are certified. Let me emphasize, I want doctors who are good, and certification can sometimes lead to that. They are not the same thing.
Right.
But not everything is doctors. And I would even argue in medicine, we have way too much credential inflation. I actually think we used to have a word for the doctor's helper. It was nurse. Now we have a nurse's helper. We have a nurse practitioner. We have like a registered nurse. We have 16 different, like, it should be as easy as possible to be, if you want to be a worker in a healthcare industry. And here's my example from teaching, right? Would you rather have a teacher who went through a traditional prep program or a teacher who interned at a school for 4 years? Because right now my kids are leaving my program with a semester of student teaching, 1 semester of senior practicum. And by the way, I think we do more practicum than any other school that I know about. Utah State also has a really good program.
Yeah.
But we push so hard for our practica, and they are great and they are amazing. And I think we do a phenomenal job. But if there was one thing I would add another 2 years in the classroom. I think it would change lives for students, for my students, for the students that they teach. But we've kind of gotten to this place where it's like, no. College happens on campus. We do it in classrooms up here where there's a PowerPoint slide. We can't have them out, you know, actually doing.
It's kind of like It's kind of like residency for doctors.
Bingo.
Right?
Yes.
Yeah.
And by the way, most of these big cities, the DC teaching residency, the Baltimore City teaching residency, there are all of these teaching residencies that are looking around and going, why aren't we having a residency where they can learn how to do this from great teachers, from the best teachers?
Right.
And I'm not saying college can't play a role in that. Maybe it is still useful for somebody. I don't know that it is, but if really we want to go hard and say, no, they need 3 semesters of critical literary analysis. Okay, fine. Like, whatever. I'm not convinced, but fine. But I'm still surprised that we look down on people who say, I went through an internship or an apprenticeship. Apprenticeship in my mind is like what you do if you want to become like the world's expert cello maker, or if you want to be a plumber. Yeah. Both of which I think are highly, highly intensive trades. And actually, I think teachers in particular would benefit. My dissertation is on this. I'm really passionate about it. I think teachers need internships and residencies. I think that is the model.
I totally agree. And I think that applies to many professions, like including my own, like even these technical professions, like this idea of an apprenticeship is very appealing to me. Like being able to actually apprentice under somebody who is experienced and knows what they're doing. I mean, I guess that does happen informally, like on the job, right? So you've
Well,
got
but
like,
here's what's funny though, and this is what drives me crazy. So somebody asked me, they were like, "Oh, an apprenticeship, right? How fair is that? You're going to send the teachers off for no pay?" And I said, no, you don't understand. There is first of all, I didn't say it has to be no pay. I think very quickly, all of a sudden, schools are going to go, "Oh, we can pay them $15,000. That's not very much, but it's more than they're making anywhere else. They're coming and they're learning. They're getting a little bit of money, and they're learning from us. Like that's a good that's a beneficial relationship. But let's pretend that they aren't getting paid. Do you know what's even worse than not getting paid? Having to pay somebody else.
Yeah.
Right now, what is college? But that like my students have to pay to student teach. That's crazy to me. Like they should at least the school that's getting them should at least cover the cost or something, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
So I think that this is a big piece of the puzzle is that there's this notion that college is the fix. We need to fix college. I want to start with, we need to uncredential. We need to decredential wherever we can. We need to look for competency assessments, badging, like credentials that are testable, right?
Just like certifications, like, you know, even just focusing on that in lieu of an actual college degree, like
and by the way, in policy terms, let me emphasize two things. First, one of the first things that you have to recognize is as soon as employers can do it, they will put as many credentials in there as they can because it makes their job easier. Yep. Don't let them do it. I really do think that it's like a fungus. It just grows on its own without you noticing, right? Don't let it. So, I think this is a place where state action can actually help, especially because most of the time it starts out pretty easy and it's not a big deal. And then all of a sudden, somebody from the cosmetology license will come up and say, well, you know, I think you really need 18 months of training before you can really call yourself a cosmetologist. You know how much training my mom needed before she cut my hair? She had my older brothers. That's how much training she had before. And boy, did we know it sometimes. But for a family with 7 kids, we got by just fine. And I look stupid occasionally.
And you still have your ears.
I am okay, right? Like that is like it. Just the amount of silliness involved in this. Yeah. And by the way, there's some legitimate stuff about lice and other stuff that you want to protect against. I'm not saying otherwise, but that's like a 24-hour training. That's not 18 months. So get as many people. Reduce the credentials as much as you can. The second thing I would say is for teachers, we have this problem where everybody has to pass a test in order to be a teacher. Look, I don't like that. I think it's a real problem because I know phenomenal educators who struggle with test taking. And I think it's immoral. It's a major problem that I have. Having said that, that doesn't mean you scrap the test. What it means is that you require everybody to report what they get, but then let principals hire the best people. Because let's say that you have somebody who struggles with test taking, but they're amazing with teenagers. I want that person in my school. That doesn't mean that I'm not aware that they need a little bit of beefing up on the content and they might need a little bit of support. But if they have phenomenal relationships with kids and they can run a really good classroom, I can support them through that. So you don't get rid of the test, you balance it out and you let principals and hiring managers make the best decisions possible. So all of those things are kind of on the demand side. Are you ready for me to talk a little bit about the supply side?
Go for it, Ben.
All right. I'm ranting.
You're on a roll, man.
I am ready. All right. So we talked about how we got to stop with the subsidies. Okay. Let's say that you're one of those hardcore, education is a public good. No, it is not. Stop saying dumb things. Public good is a very specific technical phrase that most people don't understand. That is not what this is. Anyway, I won't get into it here, but let's say that you're hardcore on we need to pay for people to go to college because it's important. And I like being in an educated society and a lot of the other stuff that people say, okay, fine. What do we want to encourage? And people will say college. I said, great. Then let's stop encouraging college debt. From a subsidy perspective, it's this easy to change from encouraging debt to encouraging college. Mm-hmm. And the way that you do it is you stop paying anybody. So right now the subsidy is on college debt, right? Right now you can get a federal subsidized loan where the rates are lower, but you can't get out of it through bankruptcy. Simple fix. You change the subsidy so that everybody can get an unsubsidized, so that they can get a market rate loan and they can discharge it through bankruptcy. Okay. What that does is and then you take all of that money that the government is currently spending and you put it into Pell Grants. Simple fix. Nobody is going to be locked into debt A friend of mine put this on Facebook and I loved it. She said, may we never again hear the word seniors with college debt. It is unconscionable to me that we have created a circumstance in which people can go to school, they can get the debt, but they can't get out of it, and they're locked in until they die. Yep. And that's what happens when you, and by the way, I understand why. The subsidy and the bankruptcy had to go together, because otherwise, what's the incentive? Otherwise, people are going to go to college and they're just going to bankrupt because they have nothing to lose. But the way that you do it is you say, okay, no, we're going to make it market rates and you can bankrupt your way out, but then that's going to take a hit to your credit. So the first thing I would say is take that money that we're currently spending to encourage people to go into debt, right? And instead, we're going to spend it in another way. Another example, do we want to subsidize colleges or do we want to incentivize students going to college? I know it sounds like the same thing. It is not the same thing. There's a big difference. Take all of the money that we are paying directly, the big checks that we write to colleges at the state and federal level, and instead say, no, we're going to put it into the hands of students in a Pell Grant form so they can use it wherever they choose to. We are not here to fund students, or excuse me, we are not here to fund systems. We are here to fund students. An even better idea that I think would be massively helpful. Students right now, I have students every semester who sign up for my class and I never see them. They never come once. It's probably 4 or 5 students a semester. That's a big number, right? And I asked somebody, I said, am I doing something wrong? They said, no, it's financial aid. So what are you talking about? It's financial aid. They said, well, the federal program is that they have to sign up for 12 or 15 credits. So they sign up for them, but then they only focus on 2 classes and they just let the other ones go. And I said, so they pay tuition on 5 classes. They only take 2. They said, yep, that's right. That's crazy. There's this is the problem of skewed incentives. And there's a super easy fix. You only reimburse classes that are passed. Now it's no longer you get the tuition up front, and it's a simple billing issue. And I think people will say, well, how will colleges manage? Oh, I think they're doing fine.
Yeah.
They have plenty of money where they can
Mm-hmm.
They can adjust so that they say, hey, we're going to let you take the class, but you have to pay us by the end of the semester or whatever. There are easy ways that they can do that. But I think fundamentally you reward the good behavior. I don't want to reward enrollment. Enrollment is too easy. I want to reward achievement. That fixes a big part of the problem. The second
outcomes, yeah.
That's it.
Yeah.
The second extension of that, by the way, gets to our other point. When somebody earns a credential, so let's say that I take the class in my new regime here. I take the class, I get an A. Now all of a sudden, the university gets 50% of the money so that they can fund the next row of students. But here's the fun part. The other 50% goes into escrow, and they don't get to touch any of it until you earn a credential. So now all of a sudden, they feel the pain every time a student drops out. Now, this one gets me hot and bothered. When a student goes to school for 2 or 3 years and they drop out without any credential, we tend to think, well, they still got 2 years. They got half, so they get 50% of the pay increase. That is not the average. The average for students who drop out is that they get 5 to 10% of the total gain. If you go to school for 3 years and 364 days of a 4-year program, you will only gain 5 to 10% on average. Most people are not as lucky as you are, Dallin.
I understand. I am the exception and not the rule.
And so I just want to be clear. I want to say that out loud so that it doesn't sound like I'm preaching the wrong thing. Yeah. If you don't believe me, look up the sheepskin effect. The sheepskin effect is it should be 25% for year 1, for year 2, for year 3, for year 4. But what's actually happening is it's more like 2 to 3% per year. And then that last year, it's the other 95% that comes through. So what you do is you say, okay, colleges, we're not going to subsidize students to help you out because that goes into your pockets. You are not going to get paid any longer until a student reaches their credential. You'll get 50% when they pass the class, and the other 50%, that big lump sum from their whole college career, all of their Pell Grants, all of their subsidized loans, all of that only comes through when they actually graduate. And if not, you're left on the hook for the rest.
Do you know how quickly universities would figure out the completion problem?
Overnight.
If this system were the case instead of the status quo, like I've lost count of how many like committees and things I was a part of focused on student success, student completion. How can we get people through the 4 years? Like, how can we get them to a degree? And there was just this, I mean, they're still incessantly debating and trying to figure out how to improve this. But I guarantee you, if you put that financial incentive in place, where if the student doesn't complete, they don't get it. They don't get what that escrow. like they'd figure
Oh,
it out real
overnight.
quick. They'd figure it out real
Overnight.
quick. There's still going to be students that don't complete. I mean, that's inevitable, but the completion rates would go way,
Well,
way
and
up.
here's the other piece, and this is hard talk. Nobody's going to like what I'm about to say, but it is absolutely critical. This is my policy side. Policy, my economics classes were very hardcore, right? Like professor comes in, I remember he said, "How much does a life cost?" And everybody's like, "Priceless. You can't put a price on that." He said, "No, it's about $9 million." And everybody's super offended, right? And then he shows a picture of the overpass over, because like, why do we have red lights? Every red light you've ever been at kills one or two people about every 5 or 10 years. And it's super easy. You could replace every one of those with a little overpass. They cost about $9 million. So we could do that. That's more than most people earn in a lifetime. It would make our society too expensive to actually live in, but that's basic policy. It's hard. You have to confront these tough realities. So here's another one. What do you call somebody who is compassionate and loving and believes in that student from a tough background who's on the poor side, but is working hard and really wants to make it? Yeah, they struggled academically in the past, but they're willing to give them a shot and sign the paperwork for them to get a loan to get to college. What do you call that person? We have a word for it in English. Do you know what the word is? Predatory lender.
That was predator was the name that came to the word that came to my mind.
Now, this sounds like a terrible thing. I am not saying compassion is bad. I am saying that what happens whether you take out a loan, whether you go to college, what's actually happening is that somebody is spending 2 years. The only thing worse than $100,000 for a useless degree is $100,000 in no useless degree.
For no degree.
That's right. And it's happening too often. If you shifted to this incentive, the other thing that would happen is overnight, admissions requirements would skyrocket back up. Now, I'm going to be cynical for a minute. Most of the people I know who are talking about this are doing it with the best of intentions. They love students. They want them to succeed. They want anybody to come into their school that they possibly can. And I will give you my own perspective. I think that MIT, Stanford, Harvard, there are a few schools that should have like, we are here for the very best and brightest. We want the top notch. We're going to be a little bit elitist. I'm good with that. I don't think it should be state schools. I don't think it should be everywhere. But I think some schools should have that incentive. But what I am bothered by is that everybody else has now taken on, if you have any academic admissions requirements, it's because you don't believe in equity and you are not being fair to students and you are not welcoming them. Let me clarify. The goal should be to create if you could have a magic ball, a crystal ball that you could look into, and you could see who was going to succeed in college and who wasn't. You give everybody access to the university who's going to succeed, and you kick out every single student who won't. That's not because you don't care about them. That's because you do care about them. Mm-hmm. It is the kindest possible thing you can do.
Yeah.
And speaking for myself here, if you don't have a sorting mechanism at the gate, then the first 2 years becomes the sorting mechanism. And all of a sudden, the first 2 years, you're losing 20 and 30 and 40% of your students. And that is hard. By the way, I think BYU Idaho, we're in the same place as Utah State. It sounds like we're always trying to figure this out. What else can we do? How can we help? How can we provide for students? And I think we do better than the national average. That's what if the scores I look up are right, we are better than the national average. We still lose most of our students between that first and second year. And I think there is a moral case for admissions requirements that predict whether somebody can make it, because it is not kind to let somebody come for a semester or 2 or 4 or 5, and then they start failing out with more debt, with money, with time wasted.
And the university gets to keep all that money.
That's the key. So the incentive, now let me clarify here. BYU Idaho, we don't want that. And it's a financial drain on us because we're subsidizing students. So tithing money is going to every student who walks in this door, probably more than they are paying. At the same time, when you're a state school and students come in, if 20% of them are staying for 2 years, you win. You get all of that money.
You get it all, yeah.
And there's no incentive to turn that down. I'm not saying college presidents are bad people. I'm just telling you the financial incentive. Mm-hmm. My rule for incentives is people aren't bad, but the incentives can be, right? The problem with journalism isn't the journalists, it's the clickbait, right? That's the problem. It's the incentive. So how do we fix this? We fix the incentive. If you don't graduate, then the college doesn't get to touch any of your money. That goes to a different college that has, and you put it into a prize form. Prizes are great. I love prizes. I love it when the government sponsors prizes. You have been able to increase your graduation rate from 60% up to 85%. Here's a $10 million prize. Go spend it because you're doing something right. Don't reward the bad behavior, reward the good behavior. Mm-hmm. And this is something that, again, policy, when you see a person who is struggling and who really needs help, your first instinct is to help them. And it does help them. But in the long run, it encourages bad behavior. Don't write a check to the universities. Instead, do the opposite. Now, we're almost at time, so I'm going to end with a last thought. It's a YouTube TED Talk by Tyler DeWitt. He's a science guy, and everybody's always told him, you can't do labs online. Online is not the answer you think. You can't do everything online. You need to be in person. Well, let me give a couple of ideas about online. First, Western Governors University is the other school that I love that is getting this right. They're doing the same kind of a thing. It's all competency-based. It's mastery-based. They have assessments up the wazoo. It's very much, and I know people who do this. They scream through it in 8 months, and they get their whole degree in 8 months. People will say, like somebody can really earn a degree. That must be a bogus degree. No, it means that they probably learned a bunch of it on their own through YouTube. It means they work really hard. Right. They didn't take any other jobs. They got through it. And the incentive is simple. You can pay $1,500 for 20 credits or $1,500 for 2 credits, but you're going to pay $1,500 for every 4-month period that you're at the university. And people go really fast because they are motivated to go really, really fast.
Yep.
Western Governors is getting some things right. I don't think they're the perfect model. I know that they have challenges, but I think it's the model that people need to be looking for. Here's the model that you could try really easily at most universities. Everybody knows, and there's research on this. Online learning just isn't quite as good as in-person learning. That's fair. That's valid. That's average. That is not specific cases. So here's what you do. The teachers, the individual teachers that are getting it right, and the students who are able to show that they are learning a lot from online, you match them up. You say, hey, Professor Piccini, you seem to really have high success rates. You're getting to 80 and 90%. We're going to let you split the cost savings from online, 30, 30, and 40. The university takes 40, you take 30, and the students take 30 home. Every class that they pass that's online, because it's so much cheaper, they're going to get a 30% reimbursement on their tuition. I'll bet that you're going to see a lot of students who are highly motivated to suddenly go into that online track. And a lot of universities are going to say, you are now, because here's the thing, there are professors who are amazing at online, just like there are professors who are amazing at in-person. But asking them to do both is it's hard. You have to specialize.
You can't do both.
Allow people to specialize and figure out how to do it. Last thought. One of the underlying problems is, let's say that you emphasize graduation rates. One of the temptations is that you're going to lower the bar for rigor. Make it easy to graduate. Just get them through, right? Here's what I will tell you. That is already a problem. That's what diploma mills are doing right now. If you want to solve that problem, we need to get serious. And here's my very simple opinion. Have a very simple standardized test that's a math test, an English test, and a writing test. And everybody can graduate. We're not saying you can't graduate, but those scores, I guarantee, if we had a standardized assessment like an ACT, but after, right? In fact, I would love it if it was the ACT, but after, with an essay, right? Same thing. People come afterwards, and that gets reported all of a sudden on your resume. All of a sudden, people are going to start asking their college questions about, how are you going to move my scores? Show me how you're going to be, because I need to be impressive. I need a good job. What are you going to do to make me into a really quality candidate? Anyway, I could talk a lot more. I guess there is one other thing that I have to say. I have to say these two. Colleges basically do 4 things. They credential, they teach, they research, and they fund sports programs. That last one is just crazy to me, and I don't care what your reasoning is. You're wrong. Stop doing it. I don't care if I get hate mail. I am a nerd, and I will fight this battle. Right? We should not be.
That makes 2 of us, Ben.
Yes. Too strong against 300 million.
I'm sorry. Like, I mean, don't get me wrong. I enjoy watching sports and stuff, but this could be a whole other podcast episode. Students
are unpaid. They don't get, I mean that slowly that's apparently changing. That's what the rumor is. Most of those students don't go on to jobs in that profession. So they now have a job in like football. What do you do with that, right? And it's a struggle there, to say nothing of the morality of like the head issues and the injuries. Like I think there's some serious problems here.
Well, and just all the money that's tied up in it.
Just from a very, like, to me, it's almost like, if I can use this example, it's like being a pope in the 1200s. If you're trying to worry about government and religion at the same time, your interests are divided, right? Like, you have to kind of pick one and do one well, right? And I think that this is the problem. If you're trying to be a school and also a sports program, and by the way, BYU Idaho, we have a facility, we have great track and field, and it's glorious up here. And all the intramural students get to use it, and it's amazing. And I walk on the track every day. It's fantastic, right? But the reality is, I think that saves us money, but it also saves us like scope. Like we're not always worried about, okay, well, we really got to protect our sports programs. Why? Why do we have to protect our sports programs? That's not what we're here for. But the other one, this is one that I'm passionate about because it hits on the credentialing piece, but it also hits on the teaching piece. I don't think there's any evidence, and I've looked really hard. I've seen a number of research papers. You are not a better teacher just because you do research. And most of our universities focus more on people having their PhDs than they do on them teaching. And you can feel it. And the number of people I know who say, well, my teacher doesn't like when I come to office hours because it interrupts his research. Okay. I know the research on research. Ain't nobody reading most of that crap, right? The reality, and look, if you're in physics, that's different. If you're in medicine, it's better. But my friends in the social sciences, my friends in humanities in particular, the research does not say good things. Like it's me and my mom who are going to read my dissertation. And I know that and I'm comfortable with it, right? We have a Ponzi scheme in education research that isn't producing truth. We all know about the replication crisis. I don't see how we can defend the subsidy for that. And by the way, in my personal experience, when I'm looking for great research, I go to the private institutions, not the public ones. I'm not going to the public universities.
Yeah.
I'm typically going to think tanks. I am going to research universities. I'm going to Rand Corporation. These are the folks that are doing the best research because that's all they do. They're not worried about trying to split both ways. A friend of mine was at a university and he said, I said, so what do you teach? How many classes do you teach? He said, well, I teach a 2, 2, and a 1. I said, okay, well, what does that mean? He said, well, I teach 2 in fall, 2 in winter, and 1 in spring or summer. I said, oh, okay, cool. He said, well, what do you teach? And I said, well, I guess I teach a 4, 4, and a 4. And he said, oh, well, what does that mean? I said, well, I teach 4 classes and then 4 classes and then 4 classes. And he said, oh, that sounds really intense. I said, are you kidding me? This is a breeze. I used to teach in public schools, right? Like, this is amazing for me, but like, I can't imagine being paid to only teach 2 classes in a semester. That's crazy. And I said, well, what do you think about in your spare time? And he said, well, I don't have any spare time. I said, okay, but when downtime, when you're not thinking about anything, he said, oh, I'm always worried about my research. I always have to be publishing. That's the credibility. He said, why? What do you worry about? I mean, I guess you don't worry about that because you don't have to research at BYU Idaho. And I laughed out loud. I said, well, yeah, I do. I'm worried about my classes. I'm worried about my students. I'm thinking about how can I teach this class better, right? Just that change would double the effectiveness of one professor, not because of specialization, but because now one professor is teaching twice as much, to say nothing of how much better they would get at teaching because that's their sole focus. And I'm not saying we don't need research. I think what you do is you create a university that's split in 2. Half of them are doing research, half of them are doing, or maybe it's not half. I don't know what the split is, right?
Yeah.
Half of them are doing teaching, half of them are doing research, but they get really good at what they do and the funding streams are separate. So that when somebody
and the incentives are separate, right?
That's right.
Yeah.
Because the other thing that we always hear is a student of mine, we learned about teaching rubrics and how you get evaluated in public schools. And she came to me and said, oh, this is great, but I'm planning to be a professor. Can you give me the one for higher education? Can I use that instead for this assignment? I laughed. I said, oh, you sweet summer child. You think that we get evaluated. That's adorable. She said, but they do in public school. I said, oh, I'm well aware. And she said, you don't get evaluated? And I said, okay, BYU Idaho, we care, right? Like I have observations, people come in, like it's great. But no, like in general, people nobody cares. You get hired based on your teaching, maybe if you're lucky. But if somebody's a phenomenal researcher and a terrible teacher, nobody's going to blink an eye. You're going to hire the person and have a graduate student worry about their class. So there are a lot of easy things that could be done. Oh, sorry, another one while I'm on the topic. BYU Idaho. Somebody apparently did a study a while ago that, I want to know how much at a university, how many buildings are at capacity. Because if it's 50%, then federal government should not be paying any money to that university until they're at 80% or higher. Because university presidents are the ones who get their names on buildings.
Yep.
And
university presidents are the ones like pushing for having more buildings built. It's almost like a competition. It's a race. Yeah. Like, especially in Utah, I'm telling you, it's like there's a new building like on the horizon, like, all the time.
It's
and
crazy.
It's like, and why? And then,
to be clear, if they need that, that's fine.
If they need it, great. Yeah.
In the era of online, I don't think they do. I suspect most college campuses should shrink by 30 to 40%. And they shouldn't go full online, but they should start to blend. They should figure out cheaper options. I think that would make sense.
Yeah.
If I were a university president, first thing I would say is we're not building another building. until you can convince me that there's a legitimate case. But then the second thing I would do is say, tell me about utilization rates. If our buildings are full from 7 a.m. until 7 o'clock at night, then we can have a conversation. Until then, I don't know why we're having this conversation. Mm-hmm. Right. And I just don't think that that's the case. When I walk through all the universities I've been at, except BYU Idaho, we start scheduling 8 a.m, 5 o'clock at night, yep. And it's pretty packed. That is not the case at a lot of the universities I've been to. No, you just kind of walk around and it's pretty empty and it's fun. This is the kind of stuff where it's like the incentives are the problem, not the people. And if we fix the incentive, everything else will line up for itself.
Yeah. Well, this has been an awesome conversation.
This is me just like, blah.
We could fill, many more episodes, I think, by unpacking like some of these individual concepts and ideas and really delving into them. But this is a lot of awesome food for thought anyway, and perfect timing with this, announcement with the student debt forgiveness and everything. It's on a lot of people's minds.
Well, I forgot to explain Tyler DeWitt's, which is probably the best solution I know of. I won't explain it because I have to go and feed my kids dinner, but maybe another day we can come back and I can talk about it. But for now, I will put it in the show notes. If you do anything, like watch his video and understand, as somebody who's thought about this for the last 15, 20 years of my life, and have really, really tried to understand this, I think the Tyler DeWitt solution is the solution that would make the biggest difference the fastest. It would totally upend the way that we think about college, and it would make an enormous difference. But the bigger part is, like, I hope students look for a good deal in a cheap college, but there are policy fixes for this. Policy fixes that we could agree on, that everybody would benefit from, except institutions like universities. So sorry, you folks. But there's a way to do this. And I think that's the goal. So I hope people enjoyed this episode. This was a good time.
Yeah, great conversation, Ben. Thanks.
That was me on a soapbox, and I appreciate Dallin encouraging me along. That was a lot of fun. All right, folks. Well, we will see you later. Have fun, and we'll talk to you again soon. The goal of Radical Civility isn't to go viral. In fact, it's kind of the opposite. It's why we don't tell you to like, subscribe, or review. It's not that those things aren't important, by all means. It's just that we have a different philosophy. Our goal isn't to make money or become the next big thing. It's the leaven in the bread idea. A few dedicated people can make a big difference, and they can do it quietly. Like Civility Sleeper Ninjas or something. So while we won't turn you down on donations or, liking and sharing and subscribing and all of that, that's not really what we're here for. The most important thing you can do to help the podcast is to be a civility ninja. Engage in a dialogue sometime instead of just an argument. Try listening to someone, really listening, especially someone you disagree with. Make an insight rather than just focusing on scoring rhetorical points. And when you do, use the Radical Civility hashtag to let us know that something we did made the world a little bit better. Now, if you insist on supporting our podcast in the traditional ways, that's okay. We won't complain. Like, subscribe, review, and donate if you can. Our Patreon page is patreon.com/radicalcivility. More importantly, have a conversation with someone you know who might find value in a conversation like the one that we're trying to have. The best thing you can probably do for us is to point intelligent, thoughtful, kind-hearted people our way. In any event, thanks for listening. We hope you find this helpful.